Ace's death quite literally changed the story of One Piece. However, what would have happened if Luffy had been the one to die at Marineford instead? The story remains the same as Luffy heads to Marineford to stop his brother's execution. The battle began between the Whitebeard pirates and the Marines, but out of nowhere, in the midst of all this fighting, Luffy suddenly came falling from the sky. Despite being battered and exhausted from the prison break, Luffy wasted no time, charging straight into the fray with one goal in mind: saving his brother, Ace. His unexpected entrance threw both allies and enemies off balance, adding another layer of madness to the already intense battle. Garp was wide-eyed at the sight of his grandson's arrival. Not only was his adopted grandson set up for execution, but now his blood-related grandson had shown up in the middle of a war. Garp was taken aback. Seeing Luffy fight through the Marines to save his brother made Garp's heart twist in knots. Despite all of his experience and power, he was helpless in the face of his duty to the Marines. He could do nothing but watch as he saw the danger his grandsons were clearly in. Garp had no sympathy for criminals, but for his family, he did. Luffy broke through the front lines with the help of Ivankov and his band of impelled down escapees. Garp watched, fists clenched, as his bruised and battered grandson charged forward, determined to save Ace. Unable to harden his heart against Luffy, Garp let his emotions get the best of him, allowing Luffy to knock him aside. With Mr. Three's wax powers, Luffy shattered Ace's chains, finally setting him free. Everything became a blur of action as Ace, reignited with a will to live, unleashed his powers and fought alongside Luffy. Together, they carved a path through the Marines, trying to make their way back to Whitebeard. Though thrilled to be reunited, the urgency of their situation overshadowed their joy. They needed to escape fast, but Admiral Sakazuki had other plans. Dripping with magma, he appeared and began mocking Whitebeard. Ace, already shaken by everything, snapped at Sakazuki's insults. Blinded by anger, he ignored the chance to escape and rushed towards Sakazuki, flames blazing. The two clashed, but Ace quickly realized Sakazuki's magma was far more powerful than his fire. The Admiral gained the upper hand and charged up a devastating magma fist aimed to end Ace. In the blink of an eye, Luffy jumped in front of Ace and took the blow in his brother's place. Ace was stunned and horrified as he saw his brother's body fall over him. Sakazuki prepared another attack aimed at Ace while he was stunned, but shivers ran down his spine as he felt a presence behind him. Whitebeard cast a shadow on the Admiral as his fury and rage seeped out. Out of sheer anger, the Emperor punched Sakazuki right in the face, cracking the air around him as he began to pummel Sakazuki. Garp too had flown into a rage as he saw Luffy fall, and Sengoku had to step in to stop him. Suddenly, the sound of drums could be heard. Instead of fading away, Luffy's body started to twitch in Ace's arms. His chest, where Sakazuki's magma fist had pierced through, began to glow faintly, and a bizarre, rubbery energy surged through him. Luffy's body suddenly began to stretch and morph in a way it never had before. His hair turned white, and his eyes sparkled with a wild, almost cartoonish glint. His entire figure became more elastic, his muscles expanding and contracting in exaggerated, almost ridiculous ways. Ace, still holding him, looked on in disbelief as Luffy's wounds seemed to disappear, his goofy grin returning despite the chaos around them. In an instant, Luffy sprang to his feet, his body full of energy as if nothing had happened. Gear 5 had been awakened. He looked more like a living cartoon than a person now, his movements defying all logic. The ground beneath him wobbled like jelly, and he bounced around with unstoppable vitality. Ace and Garp were stunned as Luffy laughed, his carefree spirit restored in the face of such dire odds. Luffy hovered in front of Ace, smiling at him. He told his brother that he wouldn't be here for long, as he felt that this burst of energy was just to see him home safely. Luffy understood that his death was imminent, and he would not survive after his body transformed back to its normal state due to the wounds he had sustained. Luffy told Ace that he was glad to see his brother again. By this point, Whitebeard was massively wounded, and Blackbeard had appeared to take advantage of the situation. Luffy noticed the approaching dilemma and told Ace to head back to the boat. He knocked out approaching Marines with his Conqueror's Haki before going off towards Whitebeard with Marco following along. Luffy showed up in front of Blackbeard and his crew before they could land the finishing blow on Whitebeard. After protecting the old man, Luffy told Marco to take his captain back. Blackbeard looked at Luffy and the glowing hole in his chest before a corrupt smile spread across his face. Blackbeard realized how strong the devil fruit in front of him was and wanted nothing more than to have it for himself. With that, the final battle erupted. Luffy's Gear 5 allowed him to move in ways that defied physics, bouncing through the air with speed and elasticity that made him seem untouchable. His punches stretched and twisted, knocking members of Blackbeard's crew left and right. Blackbeard unleashed his powers of darkness as the Yami Yami no Mi began swallowing everything in its vicinity. His crew closed in, but Luffy, even in his weakened state, fought with the ferocity of a cornered lion. His punches slammed into them with explosive force, sending Burgess and Shiryu flying into rubble. Luffy fought against the Blackbeard pirates and his laugh echoed, but there was a sadness in it, knowing that this would be his final stand. Finally, as Luffy's energy began to wane, his attacks grew slower. By this time, Whitebeard and Ace had nearly retreated, and Luffy had defeated half of Blackbeard's crew. But the captain himself was still kicking, and Blackbeard finally closed in on Luffy, suddenly nullifying his devil fruit powers. Luffy, exhausted and bleeding, was caught in Blackbeard's grasp. In the distance, a massive presence was felt. Blackbeard knew he was out of time. As Luffy's body became became lifeless, Blackbeard used his power to extract the young pirate's devil fruit from him just as Shanks neared the shore. The Blackbeard pirates escaped quickly before Shanks could catch wind of what he'd done. Garp screamed at Blackbeard, but Sengoku held the Emperor-level Vice Admiral back. Sakazuki had gotten back on his feet and was aiming for Ace. But before the admirals could take advantage of the opportunity, Shanks declared that any further attacks would result in the red-haired pirates joining the war. Shanks soon learned that Luffy had passed away and was taken to his body. A dark shadow clouded Shanks' face, and his conqueror's haki began spewing out of him. It crackled as he tried to suppress it. Shanks quietly carried Luffy's body to his ship. He told Ace he could come there when he saw fit. Both parties declared a ceasefire as the injured Whitebeard pirates, Edward Newgate himself, and Ace retreated from Marineford while the red-haired pirates took Luffy's lifeless body away. Seeing all of this, the heartbroken Garp stopped rampaging and quietly followed Shanks aboard his ship, and the parties sailed away. The front page of the news declared that worst generation pirate member Straw Hat, Monkey D. Luffy, was executed in Marineford. Word of this would soon reach every member of the separated Straw Hats, and one by one, each member would fall into despair. Nami, Usopp, and Chopper broke down as soon as they heard the news. Each of them displayed their heartbreak clearly and profoundly. Sanji didn't believe the news when he heard it. He simply continued his training, though he was visibly irritated and angry. Frankie broke his latest project in a fit of rage before lying down and weeping, thinking of the time he spent with Luffy. Robin and Brook kept the pain in their hearts. Unable to believe the news, they tried to keep themselves composed. Zoro didn't respond when he heard the news. He left Mihawk's castle and began fighting the human drills. Ace was wallowing in uncontrollable sadness when word reached the Whitebeard pirates that Shanks was going to hold Luffy's funeral at Fuchsia Village. The Whitebeard commander got out of his room and prepared to depart for the village. At the time, Whitebeard was still recovering from his wounds, but other Whitebeard commanders went with Ace to honor Luffy's memory. The two crews would meet in Fuchsia Village for Luffy's funeral. Dodon couldn't bear the news. She beat up Garp, blaming him for letting Luffy pass away in his presence. Garp couldn't say a word to her. It was his fault. He didn't save his grandson. As Luffy's loved ones buried him, a deep sadness could be felt in the air. Shanks wore Luffy's straw hat as he hid the tears falling down his face. The moment with the red-haired pirates, Whitebeard pirates, the former vice admiral, and the villagers was caught by reporters, and the picture was spread across the globe. When the newspaper finally reached each of the Straw Hats, all of them decided to go to Fuchsia Village. Zoro had spent the days fighting the human drills before Mihawk finally stepped in once the newspaper came. The world's strongest swordsman gave him a boat, and Zoro thanked him. Each Straw Hat reached the village, one after the other, and gathered there. Another man had arrived as well. He greeted the Straw Hats before telling them that he had come to pay respects to Luffy. The man clearly hadn't slept for days. The group met Garp at the village, who led them to Luffy's grave. There, they found Ace sitting in front of the tombstone. The man was the first to call out to Ace. Ace didn't register the call at first, but he soon looked back and yelled out, "Sabo!" in shock. It seemed like Luffy and Ace's brother, Sabo, was alive all along. Unfortunately, the reason for their reunion was anything but happy. The Straw Hats had a very emotional moment in front of Luffy's grave, but Zoro was the first to declare that he would carry on Luffy's dream in his place. He wouldn't just be the strongest swordsman in the world, but he would also fulfill Luffy's dream of becoming the Pirate King. It was an incredibly bold statement, but each Straw Hat's resolve strengthened at Zoro's words. They decided to carry on for Luffy's sake with Zoro at the helm. Ace and Sabo resolved themselves again, but the primary thing on Ace's mind was vengeance against Blackbeard and the Marines. Sabo was already after the world government, but now it was personal. The Straw Hats decided that they would meet again in 2 years at Sabaody Archipelago and continue their journey where they left off. They resolved to become much stronger than they were right now so they could shoulder Luffy's dream together. Meanwhile, Ace decided to go back and strengthen himself for his next clash with Blackbeard and Sakazuki. He could never forgive himself for having put Luffy in that position and would pursue his vengeance. The Straw Hats went back to the places they were sent by Kuma and began training once more. 2 years passed since the fateful war at Marineford. By this time, Blackbeard had gained sufficient notoriety, but the Whitebeard pirates had also had multiple skirmishes against the new Emperor's crew. Each Straw Hat member had grown significantly more powerful during the time they spent training and soon left for the Sabaody Archipelago to continue their journey. In this timeline, each of the Straw Hats got much stronger than their power levels were in the original timeline. Their anger toward Luffy's death led all of them to be more serious than ever before, and as such, they increased their power by multitudes. At the same time, the Straw Hats lost that happy-go-lucky spark they once had during their time with their former captain. They became much more serious in nature and focused on achieving Luffy's and their dreams together. At the same time, Ace got much stronger for his eventual fight with Blackbeard, while the latter became much more powerful after gaining Luffy's devil fruit. But that wasn't the only thing on Marshall D. Teach's agenda. Returning to the story, the Straw Hats went to Sabaody before heading off to Fishman Island, much like in the original timeline. Meanwhile, Ace trained on a volcanic island under the guidance of Whitebeard. He began enhancing his haki as well as the powers of the Mera Mera no Mi. Vengeance fueled his development, and his anger reflected deeply in his flames. He had spent the 2 years strengthening himself and fighting off Blackbeard's pirates as they tried to seize control of Whitebeard's territory. Whitebeard himself was no longer capable enough to fight due to the numerous injuries he had sustained during Marineford and his already declining health himself due to age. Ace would soon receive a direct declaration of war from Blackbeard, who declared that he would defeat all of the Whitebeard pirates and take both Whitebeard's head as well as his devil fruit. Word of this reached the Straw Hats as well, and Zoro decided to set out to help Ace and his crew in this battle. The Marines would bide their time, intent on striking when both crews were at their lowest. Kaido, in particular, wasn't interested in getting involved for the time being, as he knew that Whitebeard himself would be unable to put up a fight considering the injuries, and he felt that both Ace and Blackbeard were far below him. Big Mom herself was preoccupied with her own territory and her potential alliance with Germa 66, and hence was uninterested in the battle as well. She did not see Blackbeard as a big enough concern yet, and had confidence in the fact that the alliance with Germa 66 would result in her gaining enough power to deal with him later if need be. Shanks, on the other hand, knew that Blackbeard could become an even bigger threat if he continued, but he didn't want to join the fight. He believed that the Marines would take advantage of this opportunity and planned on dealing with them if the need arose. It seemed like this war may be even more cataclysmic than the war between the Marines and the Whitebeard pirates. Each party was planning their next move, and there seemed to be a greater cause for the Marines to intervene in a fight between two emperors of the sea. The allotted time neared, and the Straw Hats set sail and joined up with the Whitebeard pirates for their clash with Blackbeard. Zoro sat quietly, sharpening his sword as the rest of the Straw Hats looked forward toward the island they were meant to clash on. The atmosphere on the battlefield was thick with tension. 2 years of pent-up rage, sorrow, and determination had brought the Straw Hat pirates, Whitebeard's remnants, and Blackbeard's crew to this moment. This would be the final confrontation that would shake the foundations of the pirate world, and whether the two parties lived or died would depend on their resolve. Blackbeard's fleet could be seen in the distance, supporters he had amassed during the 2 years everyone else was training. It was clear why this man had become a Yonko, but behind the Straw Hat pirates were the remaining members of the Whitebeard pirates, from commanders to their crew. Whitebeard himself was standing at the helm of the Moby Dick. His form was nowhere near his prime, but the man still possessed the aura of a king. At the head of the Straw Hats stood Zoro, his swords gleaming in the fading light. The loss of his captain had left a scar on his heart, and he was no longer the carefree swordsman who followed Luffy's lead. He was now a leader in his own right, and the weight of Luffy's dream rested on his and the rest of his crew's shoulders. Ace and the remaining Whitebeard pirates stood ready. Ace's fists were clenched, flames flickering around him. His heart burned with grief and guilt for the death of his younger brother, and his mind was fixed on one thing: vengeance against Blackbeard, and then later, Sakazuki. Ace, too, had gotten much stronger at this point, and he would use all of it to defeat Blackbeard. Blackbeard used his rubbery arms to launch himself onto the island as the rest of his crew began making landfall. It was a mockery of Luffy as Blackbeard laughed loudly. Zoro and Ace got off their ships, their eyes bright with fury. Blackbeard's power had only grown in the past 2 years, and with Luffy's devil fruit now in his possession, he believed himself to be unstoppable. The battle erupted in a flash of steel and fire. Zoro charged forward, his swords slicing through the air with deadly precision, while Ace unleashed torrents of flames that scorched the battlefield. The Straw Hats, alongside the Whitebeard pirates, clashed with the enemy, and the battle began in earnest. Sanji's fiery kicks collided with Blackbeard's commanders, his anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Nami summoned winds. Usopp took down enemies from a distance. Robin's hands bloomed from the ground, breaking bones and disarming opponents. Frankie unleashed a barrage of weapons and cannon fire, while Chopper tore through the battlefield, his normally gentle nature replaced by the fury of a berserker. The Straw Hats fought harder than they had ever fought before. They had trained for this moment, knowing they would face Blackbeard and avenge Luffy's death. But Blackbeard's forces were nothing to scoff at. The Emperor himself disappeared behind his crew as Ace and Zoro fought side by side against his commanders. Zoro clashed with Shiryu, while Ace fought against Burgess. The fights were brutally intense. Ace couldn't get too close to Blackbeard without facing the effects of the Yami Yami no Mi, but Zoro knew he could cut down the pirate. He had resolved to do the same. Shiryu proved to be a capable opponent, and despite his invisibility, Zoro was keeping track of him. The fight waged on, and both Burgess and Shiryu were mortally wounded, but in the chaos, everyone failed to notice that Blackbeard had disappeared from the battlefield. By the time our heroes realized where he was, a massive quake was felt near Moby Dick. Whitebeard had clashed with Blackbeard, but he couldn't land more than a single blow. Eventually, Blackbeard took significant damage when Whitebeard decimated the ship, but Whitebeard was no longer the strongest man alive. Blackbeard endured the blow, and in an instant, he took Whitebeard's life as well as his devil fruit. This sight sent Ace into a rage. His flames turned blue from the anger, and the ground near him started to erupt into flames. The sight of Whitebeard's dead body became the catalyst for Ace's awakening. Ace blitzed toward Blackbeard in a blaze of blue flames, and Blackbeard attacked with the power of the Gura Gura no Mi, cracking the air around him. Ace's attack was too powerful, though, and Blackbeard was sent flying into the island. Zoro wasn't slow on the uptake, and he dashed towards Blackbeard, who had to defend himself again with the Gura Gura no Mi to keep Zoro from cutting him in half. At the same time, Ace summoned his strength, flames roaring around him as he launched a devastating blue sun of flame. Blackbeard released the powers of the Yami Yami no Mi, and the darkness increased to try and swallow the massive ball of fire. His devil fruit took a decent chunk of power from the attack, but Blackbeard was thrown further into the nearby mountain. Blackbeard cursed as his powers weren't acting like they normally normally would. He felt resistance within himself. It seemed like Luffy's devil fruit, the form of Nika, was causing turmoil inside him and wasn't letting Blackbeard bring out the full potential of his devil fruit. He began to panic as his remaining commanders came to defend their captain. All of a sudden, cannon fire erupted around the battlefield. A marine battalion the size of a buster call had appeared near the island, with Admiral Kizaru, Fujitora, and Aramaki at the helm of 2 of the ships. No sooner than the Marines' arrival, a sudden shockwave rippled across the battlefield. The air seemed to tremble, and a powerful presence made itself known. Everyone turned to see Shanks and his red-haired pirates standing at the edge of the island, his conqueror's haki releasing like lightning in the air. The situation had instantly worsened for everyone involved. The Marines weren't supposed to make a move this early, but it seemed like they'd gotten orders from the higher-ups to move in. Shanks wouldn't take that lying down, and he showed up to even the odds. Zoro and Ace's focus didn't shift, though, as they continued pressuring Blackbeard. Sanji, Marco, and Jozu arrived to help them with the commanders, allowing Zoro and Ace to continue aggressively pushing against Blackbeard. Blackbeard had to use the power of darkness to combat Ace's flames, while using the strength of earthquakes to defend against Zoro. Meanwhile, Nika continued to oppose Blackbeard. It looked like he had made a significant error, forcing a mythical Zoan type to be under his control. After witnessing Luffy's Gear 5, Blackbeard became greedy for its power, and ever since he got it, tried his best to unleash its full potential and master it. He remembered the sounds of drums he heard when Luffy's hair turned white, and his form changed to one of the most powerful beings he had seen. He had wanted to have that for himself, to hear the same sounds, to bend the surroundings to his own will, but had no luck so far. He could, however, feel the will of the fruit opposing him and interfering with his other devil fruit powers. He tried to bend the will of Nika time and time again, but it was only now did he start to develop doubts. Was it a good decision to have stolen this fruit from Luffy, or would it have been better to let Luffy die with it and find the fruit once it reappeared? He had not expected the will of the fruit to interfere so strongly when faced with Luffy's friends. The Marines had already sent word to headquarters that the red-haired pirates had arrived and were clearly in opposition with them. Their decision was rushed, and they did not have the strength of Sakazuki, the current fleet admiral, backing them up. But orders are orders, and the Marines had to clash against the red-haired pirates with new weapons they called the Seraphim, artificial warriors that imitated the power of the warlords of the sea, yet had dark wings and flames, similar to the Lunarians. Soon, dark circles began appearing over the island, invoking the feeling of magic. Suddenly, in the midst of this war, the Elder Saint Saturn appeared. The Marines and the red-haired pirates immediately came to a halt as they saw the Elder arrive. He told the Marines to stand down before turning his attention towards Shanks. The Emperor seemed less than pleased with the arrival of the Elder, and even seemed to know him. Saturn told Shanks that he was only here for Blackbeard and would put a stop to this war if the pirate was handed over to him. Zoro and Ace already had Blackbeard on the ropes, but Saturn stepped in between the pirates and told both Zoro and Ace to stand down. The two were so close to their revenge, but now an old man was telling them to stand down. Before they could make a decision, though, Blackbeard wrapped his darkness around Saint Saturn. Even the Elder was surprised that he was unable to break out of it, as Blackbeard started laughing maniacally before suddenly being pinned down by a massive bird-like monster. Blackbeard's hold over Saint Saturn broke as he struggled under the demonic bird's weight. The other members of the Blackbeard pirates broke off from their fights and went to help Blackbeard. As Saint Saturn transformed into a massive spider-like yokai, Ace and Zoro clashed with him, hell-bent on getting their revenge on Blackbeard. During this time, Sabo and the revolutionaries were carrying out their own agenda. Under the lead of Dragon, the entire revolutionary army had gone to attack New Marineford, having uncovered that the majority of the Marines were out for the current war. The revolutionaries attacked the base where Fleet Admiral Sakazuki was, intent on bringing him back in chains. The red-haired pirates and the white-beard pirates found out about this when the Marines suddenly went into chaos. Meanwhile, the clash between the revolutionaries and Marines was intense, but the revolutionaries overpowered the Marines at this time. However, a few Marines in particular clashed head-on. Among them were Kobe and Helmeppo, who weren't going to let their base be taken. Meanwhile, Dragon and Sabo were facing off directly against Sakazuki. Dragon displayed extreme levels of power with his ability to control the weather, and Sabo's haki was keeping him in the fight, on level ground with the fleet admiral. On the isolated island, our heroes and Blackbeard were fighting against the two elders, but they seemed unbeatable because of their regeneration. The only time they were properly hit was when Blackbeard used the Yami Yami no Mi to neutralize their powers long enough to allow someone else to attack them. The elders hadn't experienced this before, and the fact that Blackbeard was able to wound them, even temporarily, made them angrier and realized that Blackbeard posed a significant threat. They had already expected Blackbeard to become a problem and wanted to take advantage of the current opportunity to kill him and ensure the Nika does not awaken again. They had hoped that the intervention of the Marines and the pirates that wanted revenge on him would be enough, but the task of ensuring the death of Nika was too important to leave in the hands of others, which is why the elders themselves got personally involved. As Blackbeard regains his stamina due to the elders' interference, he begins spreading his devil fruit powers more, while using the Gura Gura no Mi to send shockwaves across the air. Meanwhile, the elders telepathically relay this situation to the others, and suddenly 3 more magic circles appear on the battlefield as the other elders arrive. The Marines themselves are looking to head back to base, and Shanks decides not to interfere in the war any further. It seems his background and mysterious relation confrontation with the Celestial Dragons stopped him. Meanwhile, the battle between Sakazuki and the Revolutionaries is nearing its end. Most of the Marines have been suppressed, and the Revolutionaries have raided their supplies. Sakazuki himself is backed against a wall as Dragon and Sabo prove to be extremely strong opponents. After thoroughly beating Sakazuki and destroying half of New Marineford, Sabo clamps sea stone cuffs on the fleet admiral, and the Revolutionaries depart from the island, having captured their prize. During his confrontation with the Celestial Dragons, Blackbeard finally understood how to utilize his powers effectively. He did not feel as much resistance from Nika and felt more control over the Nika Devil Fruit. His understanding of his powers unlocked a little more of the potential he saw when Luffy unlocked Gear 5, and the threat he poses has increased to astronomical levels. He could only imagine how much more stronger he would get when he unlocked all there is to it to this particular Zoan fruit. At the same time, the Straw Hats and Ace's revenge seems far from completion. With each passing development, it becomes more and more clearer to Zoro and his crew that if they prolong the fight much longer, it is highly likely that there will be more to lose than to gain. Although Zoro wanted to go to all lengths to get his revenge on Blackbeard for the death of Luffy, he still had Luffy's dream to live for, and he was going to make sure the whole crew would be alive and present when they found the One Piece. Despite the Blackbeard pirates having lost a major chunk of their forces, the Whitebeard pirates now have to deal with the Elders as well. None of them are able to bring harm to the Elders other than Blackbeard. In this situation, it seems the ability to nullify Devil Fruits may prove to be most effective against the yokai-wielding Elders, and if their regeneration is stalled, then they can be defeated. But Imu wouldn't let this threat stay standing. Ace orders the rest of the Whitebeard pirates to retreat from the island, telling Marco to gather everyone and depart as the fight is getting out of control. The Straw Hats and Ace retreat as well, putting their crews above their revenge and let the Elders take care of Blackbeard. As the fight progresses, one of the Elders immediately flinches and signals to the others to retreat immediately. While battling it out with Blackbeard, all of them immediately stop and start running towards different directions. Blackbeard initially mistakes them for running away, however, on second thought finds it odd. As he looked around to observe why the Elders all went in different directions, he felt a glow above him and looked up. As soon as the Straw Hats and other people were about to depart, a beam of light came crashing on the island. As the dust settles, everyone on the island is found staring at the place where Blackbeard was left, standing only to witness a colossal hole left there with Blackbeard nowhere in sight. The war had taken a dramatic turn. Ace and Zoro immediately hurried to get their friends and crew out of the island and onto their ships on sea before another one of the same beam fired again. Meanwhile, the Elders went back into their humanoid forms and stared down into the hole, witnessing the remnant of Lord Emu's attack. As they were about to turn away to leave, they started to hear drumming. Saturn looked back in shock into the hole, and the others looked around to find the source of the voice. As they realized the implications, the ground started to tremble violently as earthquakes shook across the whole island, terraforming the surroundings in such a way that made it difficult for the people on land to get onto the ships. Some members of the Whitebeard crew and the Straw Hat crew were left stranded on the island, while Shanks observed everything from afar on his ship. In shock, shadows twirled around the Elders as a jolly but sarcastic voice boomed, "It's no fun if it's just so easy!" Blackbear appeared on top of the Elders, his hair white, his eyes gold, sporting the widest grin that would normally be humanely not possible, but his stretchy body allowed for it to be so. He felt exhilarated with the power and potential he had just awakened, all doubts regarding stealing the fruit gone from his mind. He felt that it was all worth it for this moment. The Blackbeard pirate remnants, initially in shock, were emboldened by their captain's reappearance. Their morale surged as their reignited spirits prompted them to take an offensive stance once again against the previously fleeing Straw Hat and Whitebeard pirates. Zoro and Ace, seeing themselves in a pinch, quickly recovered from shock as they took a defensive stance and fought back to buy time and think of a way to escape. Meanwhile, Blackbeard, high on his newfound power, was charging non-stop against the Elders and pushing them back. He would jump from one Elder to the next, not giving them any time or space to think or plan their next actions. This time, Blackbeard was smart enough not to let them distance themselves from him in order to discourage Imu from firing the beam again. On another side of the battlefield, Zoro cut down one enemy and Ace burned the next. As they kept fighting from across the battlefield, Zoro observed from the corner of his eyes odd fissures appearing around Blackbeard. It looked like cackles of white and black, light and darkness. And although he could hear the drums, they sounded somewhat offbeat, but Blackbeard himself was too exhilarated to notice. The Elders were progressively being pushed back, and Blackbeard saw a future where he might actually win this war by a landslide. Meanwhile, outside the island on the ships, no one was able to witness the fight anymore due to the unique terraforming of the island shores, which ended up raising them high above sea level. The Marines on the ship planned to target the pirate ships in order to do some damage control. Shanks, who was previously just watching, stepped up again and ominously warned them all to not interfere and let the fight play itself out. Back in the main battlefield, the Elders were becoming increasingly worried regarding Blackbeard's growing power and how, if he was left alive, would end up becoming a major threat to them and Imu. They knew for certain that no matter what the sacrifices, they could not let Blackbeard leave this island alive. This might be the only chance they would get to get rid of Nika. After this realization, realization, their attacks became more aggressive and reckless, with no regard for their own safety. The elders, sensing their dwindling power, summoned dark abilities. The sky darkened, and dark clouds started gathering above. Blackbeard, rather than feeling cautious, felt more invigorated as he laughed with joy and power. The air cackled as both the elders and Blackbeard prepared for their next move. It seems as though the elders were about to summon the beam again, not caring about their own safety as the clouds seemed to encompass the whole island. Zoro and Ace realized this and quickly rushed towards the elders to stop them in order to protect their friends. Zoro clashed with Miss Juro, and Blackbeard went to attack Peter. As Ace rushed towards them with his flames, Saint Saturn blocked him. In his desperation to get through to the other elders, he instigated a flurry of attacks, all of which were easily blocked or parried away as Saint Saturn mocked him to not to interfere in their fight. Ace, feeling the same powerless as he did back in the Paramount War, became enraged. He attacked again and again and again. As the Saint was blocking him, he began to observe the colors of the flame change. With each attack, the flames would become brighter and paler and hotter. His hair color started to lighten and his skin began to darken as flames began to erupt from his whole body. He gave one more final burst of attack with an enraged cry as the Saint was sent flying back onto another elder and interrupted them from proceeding to summon the beam. The flames erupted in a massive explosion of heat and light, catching the elders off guard. The resulting explosion shook the very foundation of the island, knocking everyone off their feet. As the dust settled, all the remnants of the revolutionaries, Whitebeard and Straw Hat pirates, and their friends stood united behind Ace. The battlefield was filled with determined faces. Ace screamed to not let another one of his people die in front of him as he charged forward towards the elders again. With a renewed sense of purpose, they charged at Blackbeard and the elders, who had begun to regain their strength. The ensuing battle was a mix of clashing wills, with swords, flames, and hockey clashing against darkness and despair. Back to Blackbeard. As his fight with the elder progressed, he could feel himself slowing down. He started to notice the signs of clashing wills of the devil fruit inside of him. Even in the midst of his worries and clashes with the elder, he laughed and tried to repress Nika. However, he slowly started to lose control of his shadows as the elder got more hits in. The Nika fruit seemed to react to the darkness of Blackbeard's devil fruit, producing bursts of light and laughter that disrupted Blackbeard's control over the shadows. Blackbeard started panicking and was desperately trying to regain control of his newfound power. He unleashed the full might of the Yami Yami no Mi, causing the darkness to fully envelop the battlefield, threatening to swallow all hope. But in that moment of despair, the power of Luffy's will surged forth. The Hito Hito no Mi did not just have a will of its own, but it also inherited Luffy's will on his death. This caused the fruit to awaken in Blackbeard when it realized that Luffy's brother and friends were in danger from the elders, who were a common enemy. It interfered whenever he tried to hurt his friends or family. The Hito Hito no Mi took control of Blackbeard's shadows and manipulated them in ways to target the Blackbeard pirates and the elders while protecting Luffy's friends and their allies. Blackbeard, in his frustration, tried to suppress the fruit but faced internal backlash as multiple wills clashed inside him and he was taking the full brunt of it. As the shadows were wildly attacking Luffy's enemies, Blackbeard could feel internal bodily pain and realized he could not utilize any of his own devil fruits. And if he continued in this particular state for long, he knew for a fact that he would die. His laughter had turned into pained gasps. The sheer incompatibility of the fruit's wills was ripping him from within. He only had a few minutes worth of time to make a decision, to either keep trying and fully regain control by successfully suppressing the Nika fruit, or take advantage of a moment's opportunity to take control and expel the Hito Hito no Mi fruit out of him. He could slowly feel his body returning to its original form, and he knew that was all the time he had to make a decision. Meanwhile, Zoro, taking advantage of the shadows, resumed his onslaught on the elders, pushing them back. He could perceptibly feel Luffy's presence around him and had a brief moment of nostalgia of fighting alongside his captain once more. This feeling reinvigorated his spirit, and he became even more determined and motivated to find the One Piece and achieve both his own and his captain's dreams. He'll find the One Piece for Luffy and his crewmates. Ace, on the other hand, was confused. He could not understand why Blackbeard was helping him. He felt even more enraged, thinking he still wasn't strong enough and needed help from one of the people who was responsible for his brother's death in order to protect his friends. Ace let his rage fuel his flames as he indiscriminately started attacking the Blackbeard pirates. Marco saw Ace and realized how the flames were not only burning Ace's enemies, but was slowly burning himself as well. He realized that although Ace had an awakening, he still had not mastered his own powers and was putting himself in danger. However, due to his rage, he had not noticed yet. Marco rushed towards Ace while calling out to him to stop, but Ace couldn't hear him. Blackbeard had made a decision. Although the power was too good to let go, it was of little use to him if he could not even master it, and his dreams were too important for him to die here due to his own greed. The devil fruits he stole were all in the end a means to an end, and he was not going to risk dying for such a means here today. With a thunderous roar, Blackbeard reached within a void in his chest and with a guttural cry of pain took out a blob of shadow. It looked like a black heart pulsating and drumming the sounds of freedom. The black shadow slowly morphed into a fruit with swirls around it. It was the Hito Hito no Mi. Zoro, who was still observing Blackbeard from a distance, and the elders around him were shocked. The elders quickly tried to rush towards Blackbeard in order to get the devil fruit. However, they were quickly surrounded by the shadows, now in Blackbeard's control. control. However, expelling the devil fruit from his body had taken a toll on him as he was gasping for air and was left looking sickly and pale. Blackbeard could barely maintain himself on his feet and knew he had to retreat quickly in order to survive and regroup with his own crew. However, if he tried to take the fruit with him, the elders would follow and so would the Marines. Blackbeard closed his eyes once and whispered, "You win this time, Straw Hat!" and called out to Zoro. Zoro looked at him wide-eyed as he caught Luffy's fruit that Blackbeard had just thrown. Time seemed to freeze for him for a moment as he stared at the fruit of his former Captain Luffy. Blackbeard slowly melted into the shadows with a wordless sneer as earthquakes quaked around him. Ace rushed towards him screaming, "Don't let him run away!" Marco rushed towards Ace and stopped him. He told him to let him go as they've at least gotten Luffy's fruit and now they need to prioritize protecting it from the elders. Zoro immediately ate it as he thought he had no choice left. He immediately inherited his captain's devil fruit and will. Now, the attention of the elders are on him and not on Blackbeard. The fight continues as the Alliance now banded behind Zoro as they face the elders. With this power, he thought he could end things here and now as him. The fight continues as with Blackbeard gone, the Pirate Alliance can now focus on fighting the elders. It was a bloody and hard battle with neither side giving any room. At the end though, Zoro, with the help of Ace and his friends, managed to push back the elders, killing Saturn and forcing the others to retreat. Blackbeard was nowhere to be found, and with Shanks' help, the pirates made a safe escape. Zoro managed to fulfill half of the promise he made with Luffy, and now sets his sights on finding the One Piece with the rest of the Straw Hats. Ace joins back with the Whitebeard pirates with their sole goal of finding Blackbeard and getting their revenge. The elders would most likely be killed by Emu for failing their mission. The Straw Hats continue their journey with the Luffy's will as their fuel. And who knows, maybe they might just find what they're looking for. Make sure to smash the like button and subscribe for more One Piece videos.